Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Today is the 24th Sunday of Ordinary Time, September the 11th, and my topic today is going to be exploring the story of the Prodigal Son. And you will see this is not a good title for this thing at all. But keep in mind that the people who look at it, and even today traditionally, many people look at it as three people: the father, younger son, the older son, and their story. Well, that's the traditional way of looking at it. There's a new way of looking at it, which I think is another insight into the meaning of this story. And yes, there are four people really in the story: the father, the two sons, and the missing mother, the absent mother. And is the absent mother's feminine energy lacking in this story? I'll talk about that later. But anyway, what I'm doing here today is I'm doing it a little differently. Traditionally we looked at it as three different people, and their story, three different people. But being a student of Carl Jung and his psychology, now Carl Jung's psychology dealt primarily with our inner world, the oneness of our inner world, and the many different energies we have within us, and how those energies can either be fractured and at war with each other, or can be integrated and live harmoniously. So those are kind of the background to looking at this story this morning. Because Jesus told this story for an obvious reason, and you know darn well that he did it with a smile on his face because he makes reference to pigs. Now, you know as well as I do, in that culture, there were no pigs. So it's a bit of a joke, a bit of humor in this by Jesus, and trying to see if he could really get their attention, if you will, and see if they could see that, hey, lighten up a bit, lighten up. Anyway, let's take a look at it from a Jungian point of view, and this may or may not be new to you. If you've ever studied any Jungian psychology, of course, it'll not be new to you at all. But anyway, and here we go. Three people, well, there's four. There's the father, two sons, and the missing mother. The missing mother. I remember when I was studying psychology, the professor gave us an exercise for the weekend to take the story of the prodigal son and write it up and tell the story of it without using religion. Without using religion. And so basically today, a little bit of what I wrote then, that was, 30 years ago, more than that already, back to the mid-'80s. So I still remember writing it, and I got a really high mark on it. He was really impressed. So anyway, that's not why I'm telling you the story. But I did do that work on it. Now I come back to this week and am reworking it again and sharing that reworking with you. But remember, it's the Carl Jung psychology, because traditionally our psychology or our spirituality has been an external thing. External, how we get along in the external world. But one thing about Carl Jung, he was able to use his psychology, which was the inner world, the inner person, and how it resonated with the gospel, and how the gospel resonated with our inner world, and to promote our own growth and transformation as a human being, as a person. So let's take a look at the gospel. Father and two sons. Now, supposing there's only one person here, but three very distinct energies, three very distinct aspects of this one person's personality or character, very, very distinct energies. And the first one I want to talk about is the young son. Now, the young son is very much a part of who we all are. or who we were rather. Certainly for me, it's 85 years ago when I was a young son. But I have memories of my young son and the unsettling time it was for me, of struggling. Who am I? What am I about? Why am I here? What's this all about? And I remember one time we had, now this will resonate with city folk, but on the farm we had silo filling it once a year where the neighbors all gathered and shared. And I remember, I think I was in grade 8. And of course, any excuse not to go to school. And so I remember my father handed me, as we began the day, we had to take the wagons out to the field, get the corn, bring them in, and throw the corn in the chopper, which cut it up and blew it up into the silo. Okay, that's the play. But my father handed to me the reins to a team of horses and a man's job. And I remember that day so clearly because I just felt, now I'm a man among men. I knew who I was at that moment. My identity came home to me, that I was a man among men. And that's the young son. That energy within that man. Who am I? Now, we know that at the time of Jesus and in many different cultures, there is what they call the identity quest. And in some cultures, young people, 15, 16, 17, they're deliberately set out from town or village into the forest. And they have to spend a week or 2 weeks out there just to survive. And the idea in that survival experience, they will come to their maturity and know who they are and what they're about in life, what their vocation is, if you will, who they are. So when they return to the village or the town or the community, they come back as an adult. So it's a growth experience, identity quest, where they have to survive on their own. No helps, nothing there. They're just out in the forest by themselves. They have to decide how to get something to eat, where to sleep, how to survive. But something happens in the psyche, in the soul. And when that young person comes back into the community, he or she knows who they are. He or she knows who they are. And when the girls return, for example, when they come back, the women are all lined up, and they hand the girl a bucket of water. And she's allowed to throw that bucket of water in her mother's face. Once. That's it. From then on, her relationship with her mother will be one of love and kindness, but never violence. And so it's transformative. It's a sign of coming of age. This vision quest which they went on. So this is what they're talking about. And the young son, he leaves home. It's a normal, natural thing to do. And, he makes the mistake of thinking, well, I'll take my money and run and enjoy it. And he does. He goes to the bars, he's drinking and carousing, recreational sex. It's all there. But then it runs out. The superficiality comes to an end. The pretense comes to an end. The fantasy comes to an end. And he's down and out. He's down. He's so far down that he has to hire himself out, as it says in the story, to feed the pigs. and that's where the humor comes in, because, with the Jewish people, there were no pigs. So that's Jesus kind of throwing a little curve in there. But the thing is, he's down and out in his bare necessity, and his necessity, in his pain, his suffering of not knowing and staying with it. Eventually it says, he came to himself. And that's a beautiful expression, coming to himself. The aha experience. I know who I am. I'm a man. I'm a man amongst men. That's who I am. I'm a man. And as a man, he decides to go home. And that, of course, is that integration. He had left the father, and that really tells us that the father at one time had actually made that trip either in fantasy or actuality. But the point is, he came to that vision quest, search for himself. He knew who he was. Now he knows who he is. And that's the father. He knows who he is as a young man. And he eventually grows up and becomes the father of 2 sons and the husband of a woman. And so here you have that integration of harmony between the adult and the adult now, where before it was an uneasy relationship between the inner child and the adult parent. But now you have that integration. There's harmony within. Well, not quite. Because there's another facet of this man. And that is the judgmental side, the authoritarian side, the duty-bound side, and the over-exaggeration of masculine energy. And that was the duty-bound one. And he couldn't celebrate. You see, when there's that integration between the young man and his father within, now keep in mind we're dealing with the inner world, you can see joy, celebration, a meal, singing and dancing. That's what the new freedom. That's the new freedom. And the young man doesn't have to go to the bars and the prostitutes. He can celebrate and sing and dance at home. He's at home within his father. His father now knows who he is. He's a man among men. But the elder son, not so. He is a very rigid, authoritarian, feeling that very resentful, a lot of resentment. And we certainly know people with resentment within them. Maybe we carry some resentment because of the way we expected people to behave. And so the man here has that inner critical parent. We call it the inner critical parent, the elder son. And he's envious of the young son because he probably wanted to go down and do his vision quest, but never did it. That part of him was formed within the father, formed within him, and he was never able to go on a vision quest. But he was carried all the time within his father. And so there's a deep resentment and unable to celebrate life. And you probably know people, maybe you're one yourself, who find it hard to let go and just say, let's have a good time. Let's gather with family and friends and eat and drink and make merry and drink and celebrate and sing and dance and let's have a ball. No, can't do it. So what it says is that father still needs further healing. There's still a fragmented personality. It's fragmented because while there is a harmony between the father and the younger son, which is himself, there is a fragmentation with the elder son, the critical parent within the parent. Will not let him enjoy it. And so you can see the inner conflict that the parent is still dealing with. And I guess all we can say is that as this story unfolds, if Jesus had to continue telling it, it might have eventually got resolved in healing and integration and harmony, or maybe not. Who knows? Who knows? We only know what we're given in this story. And then you come to the father himself, and he is, I think what I really see here is feminine energy in the symbol of the Father, because he is a symbol. He's part of a story, so obviously he's a symbol. He's not for real. So really what you see with the Father, the feminine energy. Remember I said a woman was missing? Feminine energy, nurturing energy, unconditional love, feminine energy. So the Father now has got a pretty well-balanced character, personality. Yes, he's still in conflict with his judgmental side, and that'll have to be resolved sometime in the future, hopefully. But in the meantime, he can let himself go. He give himself permission to go on the vision quest, to make all the mistakes that he made, to fall flat in his face, come to his senses finally and see who he really is, and be reintegrated back into his Father as a young adult now. But there is that integration. It's a pulling together a fragmented personality and integrating it so there's harmony within. And so the Father then is a symbol. He's a powerful symbol of feminine energy. He could let his younger son go, and that takes a lot of love to let a child go. And I think parents must know that. When a young man or young boy or girl says, "Hey folks, I'm leaving home, I'm going," it's a tearing, it's painful, it's difficult. And so that's all included in that story. But the thing is then when the son can return, in other words, when the reintegration takes place, it's possible because of the feminine energy. That Father is a symbol of feminine energy, which is open and receptive. It's energy which is welcoming and hospitable. It's feminine energy which is filled with unconditional love and compassion and kindness. I remember the story. I was at a funeral once, and the lady that we had the funeral for had several sons. And I remember one of the sons at the visitation saying, "She never gave up on me." He had kind of like the prodigal son, a bit of a rough time of it in growing up. But he said, "She never gave up." And how many women there are, and men, mothers and fathers, who never give up. That feminine love energy, which I spoke about last week, that feminine energy never gives up. And that's why there's such healing within that man. He's a symbol of powerful inner healing, of harmony within, of unity and integration. And at the same, it's on the one hand. On the other hand, he still has work to do. He's got to find some kind of reconciliation and healing with the elder son. In other words, his judgmental side, his critical parent, as we call it. He's got to find somehow to find reconciliation and healing so that the resentment he's carrying, the anger, the duty-boundedness, which has really got him into trouble with his father, he's got to do something with that. And that's work. And we're not surprised at that in our own journey. As we do our integration work, as we become aware of our fragmentation within, and as we work for integration and harmony, we do achieve a healing, inner healing we call it. And that inner healing is inner harmony. It's integration. Our inner world then is working holistically. And yet, I think most of us would say, I still have work to do. We are always in the process of becoming. And part of that is the unfinished work that we haven't yet been able to bring into that integration, that oneness, that unity. And so I think this story of the prodigal son, as they call it, and it's a misnomer. It's a misnomer entirely. But anyway, we're stuck with it. But it has to do with the inner world. It can have to do with our inner world, our understanding of our own journey within our own self. The different characteristics we have within us. Jungian psychology tells us there's a village inside us. Villagers, many different aspects to our personality and our character. And some of it is fragmented and some of it is integrated. And our work, our spiritual work, of course, is integration. And the more integrated we become, the more holistic we are, and the more we're able to be. And remember that old song, just to be is a blessing, just to live is holy. God bless.